The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I am Wendy Stewart, and tonight's guest host is the one, the only Ryan Janek Walkowski. Welcome. How are you?
Oh, really happy to be on Triversity Talk. Thank you for the invitation. It's such a pleasure.
So great to have you. Love the rainbow in your hair tonight.
It's a topic. I feel it coming. I feel it coming. Tonight's topic.
And you feel it coming because, right, we're almost up to Memorial Day. And what happens after Memorial Day? Pride Month.
The aura is right around your head. I could just see it glowing. You have a halo of rainbows.
Rainbows are everywhere. Did you have a good week, Ryan?
Well, you know, I was really excited about this. So the week actually starts now because all I've been thinking about is finally I get to be on Triversity Talk.
Oh, my God.
Yes, great. But this has been something I wanted to join you with for quite a while now. So this is really nice to be here today.
Well, thank you. I am very flattered. For those of you who don't know Ryan, he does a show called Ryan Reporting. You talk about just about everything on Ryan Reporting, right?
Absolutely everything. Although there's been a shift to more joyous content, more happy content, because I've gone through the spectrum of going to every single activist a moment. And then I was like, oh, there's other things. So I really, when you say it's everything, I've done travel. It really started as an activist show of what was going on in the base of New York. And it's sort of where we're going back to today, but about 90 miles plus from where we started.
Oh, you know what? You have actually brought it full circle because, yeah, if you did start as an activist, so see, I never knew that. This is why I love having co-hosts on, because even though you and I know each other and we are friends and we're in the same industry, I discovered things about you. So you're perfect to be here tonight. So Ryan has mentioned, you know, activism. We are coming into Pride Month. And it lasts a whole month. And in New York City, we have our big Pride March. They told me when I've been a marshal a few years with Triversity, they told me never to say Pride Parade. I was told I was not allowed to say Pride Parade. It's a march. They said, we'll have a parade when everyone has equal rights. I'm just filling you all in on what I was told. But you know what?
I want to jump in. I was corrected once by Tyra Allure Ross. Many of you have seen Tyra on Pose.
Yes.
We're Bronx Pride. And I said, what are some of the great things to do when it's not Pride in the Bronx? And she's like, darling, it's Pride every day. So
I love it.
In honor of Tyra, with it being Pride Month, it's an extension of everyday Pride that we're going to just amp it up a little bit more for the whole month.
Right. It's just amped up a little bit more. I love that. That is every day should be Pride Month. Every month should be Pride Month.
I never forgot those words.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Bronx Pride. We've got Bronx Pride coming up. Queens Pride.
Bronx Pride, put an S on that. There's two. There's the one Bronx Pride, and there's Apollonia Cruz has a Pride in the Park. There's an S at the end of Bronx Pride.
Let's give a shout out to Apollonia Cruz. Absolutely. Now, Ryan, will you be present at both those prides?
My heart is always in Bronx Pride, and luckily they're on different days, so I can actually attend both.
Right.
I'm a New Yorker that doesn't live in the Bronx, but is so pro-Bronx, and all my friends in the Bronx are like, you go to the Bronx? And they say, go to Pride. And I'm like, there's so much in the Bronx. I love it. I love it.
I love hearing that, Ryan. You know, I'm a Bronx girl, born and raised.
I just learned that. I was going to say, this is my friend Wendy from the Bronx.
Wendy from the Bronx, Jenny from the block. But it's
exactly what I thought of.
It's funny that it's come full circle for me, because our mutual friend, the actor Tim Moss, he does Bronx Pride. He does so much work up in the Bronx with the LGBTQ community. Listen, you can't take the Bronx out of this girl. That's all I could say. But tonight we're very excited about our guest that we're having tonight. This guest tonight is the creator of the newest Pride in the beginning of June. I believe it's June 4th or June 5th, and he will correct me.
Correct.
Thank you, Ryan. That's what a good co-host does.
Saturday, noon to 3 p.m.
What time is it? I was going to say, do you have the correct time?
Saturday, noon to 3 p.m.
Got it. Thank you so much, Ryan.
And it's in the Hamptons.
And it's in the Hamptons. And this is the most surprising thing. First of all, I want to thank Ryan for bringing our guest tonight, because I didn't know anything about the Hamptons Pride. A little naive. I just assumed.
How could you? It doesn't exist yet. It's the first.
No, I know
he's out right in front of our eyes.
It's incredible. But how could the Hamptons not have had a Pride? Made no sense to me. And then Ryan introduced me to the person that's making it all happen. Tom House, come on in.
Hello, Wendy. Hello, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. Now, you're in the Hamptons, I would assume, right?
Yes. I live in East Hampton.
You're in East Hampton. I'm a smart girl. You see, because you're doing Hamptons Pride, I just assume you must be somewhere in the Hamptons.
Yes, I'm all the way up north by the bay.
By the bay. I know East Hampton quite well. I used to go out there a lot, believe it or not, in the 80s when it was moving and shaking. And I would say probably back then you were bartending at the Swamp. Or the early 90s.
Not till the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't that far away, but yeah. I was thinking maybe we would have passed each other. And
maybe.
Right?
Maybe I made you a drink at one point.
What? Okay, here's a test, Tom. What did you make me? What's my favorite drink?
Oh, see. And a good bartender knows their customers by their drinks.
This is true.
I'm going to say a margarita.
Okay, you're not too far from the truth. I drink both margaritas and Cosmo. I like, party girl drinks. What can I say? I'm not hardcore. I'm not scotch or whiskey or Ryan. What about you? What kind of drinks do you like?
I've actually been there when Tom was working. And here's the thing about the location. You have to drive there. We're kind of New York City minded. You get on the subway and you go to your venue. When you go to an event in the Hamptons, if you don't have car service, you're driving yourself. So I would have gotten the water. And it's Montauk Highway, and it's a long route until you see lights again. So I would have been the water person.
So thank you for bringing up something, right? In the Hamptons, I used to take a car service to whatever clubs I went to. And I did that for exactly what Ryan is saying. I can't go out and have a bottle of water. That's just like, why am I out? I might as well be home. So, and you know what? If I came to see you, Tom, I would want, I'd like to have my little party drink. It's a whole night. You know what I'm saying? I only have 2 drinks. I never do more than that. But we all know you don't ever want to drink and drive. So you have your car service. You're all set up in the Hamptons. And there you were, all right, from the late 80s and working at the Swamp, which is legendary. Okay, don't judge me on this. Okay. I think I've been there, but it's a little foggy. Uh-huh. See, Ryan was drinking water. I think it was a little foggy. So how did you start bartending there?
Well, I actually started bartending on Fire Island when I was right out of school. I did a couple of summers at the Fire Island Pines. And that's a big, intense party there.
So I was there for 5 years. And it would have been around the time you got out of school. So what club were you at or bar?
I worked at the Cultured Elephant. Do you remember?
Oh, of course.
So kind of a strange story. I was a lifeguard and they hired me to work the Botel bar because I had lifeguarding certification. So they had a bartender who was also a lifeguard, and I could do the two things at once.
No, but you need to. Those queens would get so drunk at tea dance. You remember?
On an island, there's water everywhere.
Right. Exactly. They fall into the bay. And Tom, this makes sense. You could jump in and save them.
Yeah.
You had a six-pack?
At the Botel pool, yes.
Right. I wonder how. Yeah, right. The Botel pool.
That was my station. My bar was right by the pool.
That's probably where I would have known you from. So you did that right out of school, and for lack of a better word, you jumped right into the scene. So I had a house in Fire Island in the Pines, and one of my first houses, I think we were in that house for 2 years, was on Ocean Walk. And I'm sure you were there when the big fire happened. Our house was one of the ones that burnt down.
Wow. No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Many memories. Okay. But you can't talk about that time in the Pines without talking about what really started to come down. One day I got off of the ferry, and there was this table there with these guys talking about this disease called GRID. Yes. Right. And they were from a small organization called the Gay Men's Health Crisis. And I knew this model. Well, I'm sure, Ryan, you probably knew him. He was the Marlboro Man. And he was a very well-known model. And all of a sudden, this guy got sick, and nobody could really figure out what was going on with him. And they were talking about this thing called GRID. And none of us knew what was coming. And the Gay Men's Health Crisis at that point was so small. And I remember thinking, you know, the president who was in charge then was doing absolutely nothing. And this was a virus. And I remember thinking at the time, what's going to happen here? All right. And then, of course, the rest is history. So, Tom, you would have been bartending in the Pines when things were just starting with the epidemic. Am I correct?
It would have been like sort of after that.
Okay.
You know? It was the late 80s. I wound up at the Swamp in 88, and I was at the Cultured Elephant, very small bar.
Okay.
I had no experience whatsoever making drinks, so that was a good place to start. Didn't get a lot of traffic there. So yeah, I mean, it was, but it was kind of sort of a little bit after. I was hearing about how wonderful and how great the Pines used to be, but, you know, when I was very young, I really didn't have much historical context for it.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you, for lack of a better word, you jumped ship, and then you started working at the Swamp.
Yeah.
You jumped ferry. You jumped ferry, and you started working at the Swamp. So we're in the late 80s now, right?
Yes, 88. I was my first year at the Swamp.
And that the history is really important to me. You know what? I know a lot of stuff. I've been around the block once or twice. Ryan will vouch for that. And I think the timeline's really important, like what was going on in the country at the time and what was going on in the LGBTQ community at that time. So by the late 80s, AIDS was really raging.
Yes. Yeah, so I just, I answered an ad that said they were looking for a bartender out east. I had been out once or twice to a friend's house, like all the way up on Girard Drive in the Springs, and it seemed like yeah, and we were, just out of college, and it seemed like it was the ends of the earth, going all the way out to
4 ways in one.
Yeah. So, and it's funny, I live in the same area right now. I've ended in the same spot where I started, where we used to go. A friend had a grandmother had a little shack on Girard Drive, the beautiful Maidstone Park Beach. And we go there every once in a while. And then I saw that, this ad, they were looking for a bartender. I was like, let me try that. And it happened to be the Swamp. So.
Now, Long Island was a very different place in the 80s. What type of publication did they advertise for a bartender for a gay bar? Would that have been in like a Good Times magazine, or which publication, if you recall?
I don't. Maybe it was Newsday.
Newsday, wow.
That's progressive for the Swamp to have then taken out an ad in Newsday, because that was a a don't say word, you know, in that era. You didn't see advertisements like we're on digital media now.
Yeah.
Well, now in the 1980s, you wouldn't see an advert for an LGBT venue whatsoever. So then to hire someone, it's like, did they even say it was the Swamp? Did they say gay bar?
You know, this is really hazy memory for me, like where I saw that ad.
That it was a different time when they were advertising.
Yeah.
You youngsters.
I knew there was one gay bar out east, or at least I knew of one gay bar out east, and this was just after the Attic had closed. If you knew about the Attic,
I remember. Wow.
Yes. So the Attic preceded the Swamp, or the Attic. The Attic started in 1970, I believe, and it closed in 1985. And the Swamp first started in 1977. So the Attic was a very different kind of club, but it was gay owned and operated, and it was beloved too. So that was there, and then down the road was the Swamp. But by the time that I was applying for a job, there was just one gay bar left, and it was the Swamp.
And the Swamp was the only one. Now, at that point, was it mixed or gay?
It was mostly gay.
Mostly gay.
Yeah, and and predominantly men. You would have maybe straight women hanging out, some lesbians. It was mostly the owner at that time, Bill Higgins, and I worked. Right. Yes, I worked for the last 2 years that Bill was alive. Bill died of AIDS in 1990, and I actually bartended his memorial. When you go to the site at hamptonspride.org, we still have somebody made that. You know, we're so small, we're so new, but somebody made that website for us as sort of a launch party gift, and they hosted it for 3 years for us. So, and they took that, I was collecting a bunch of old photos. And so they took this one photo and they put it on the landing page. So that's what you'll see when you go there, is a picture from 1990.
Hang on. I'm good. This is like really hokey because I printed it, but.
No, you did.
That's a picture.
You, you know.
So, you know, it's for me, I was just starting then. But also, intermixed with, Wendy, what you were talking about, the solemn specter of AIDS that, haunted everything. And that was Bill Higgins, the first owner of the Swamp. That was his memorial party.
Wow. Incredible. And he passed in the early 90s.
1990.
In 1990.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I always talk about the history of AIDS because I think we have to keep repeating it over and over again because, a lot of the kids that are my friends in their late 20s and early 30s, they ask me, what was it really like? I know it left like such an impression and a mark as if I had a part of my body cut off. And I tell people this, I will never be the same from losing friends. And the fact that you're saying he died in the early 90s, we were on the cusp then. The people that avoided the AZT and were taking these off-label drugs, which ended up being the cocktails, and they weren't easy to get, they lived. People like Bill Higgins, and again, I don't know what the story was. He either didn't have access to it or maybe he didn't respond to one collection of drugs. I don't know, but we lost a whole wave of people then. And I look at the friends I have now that I knew back in the 80s that are alive, that have been on those life-saving cocktails from then. And they don't call them cocktails anymore. But it is really incredible. And it was an incredible time to have lived in. Now, you were what, like in your late 20s, early 30s around that time?
I was in my young 20s.
You were in your young 20s.
Yes. Okay. And it was scary to me. I grew up in East Islip, Long Island, in a Roman Catholic very traditional enclave, so it was scary, I wasn't out in every place, so it was a long process. And so when I arrived at the swamp, so many of the employees, got sick, and we lost employees, we lost customers. So I was entering at really a really dark time.
I can only imagine when you see that happening around you. Ryan, where were you at that point in your life?
I was on Long Island, and I was very aware that the fear that Tom is speaking of, because there was just, if you were to ask a question about healthcare at that time, you were then to some degree in a public environment. I'm talking about in a school setting when you're in health class, you're outing yourself to being bullied for the rest of the year if you ask a question about how to stay safe. So it was a really scary time. But also the thing we didn't touch on is that places like the swamp are also the beacons, because they were the ones that started to have the fundraisers, and the Hamptons is well known for the fundraisers, but venues like that is where people would gather, they would have their ideas, and then there'd be like, the potluck. And there was also a really beautiful thing of the community coming together at that time. So I don't want to just paint the fear brush.
Yes.
It was a uniting that happened that was very organic. It was very needed, and it was very love-based.
Beautiful, really. And I do recall that happening, but I also remember there were a lot of kids that they started coming out in the 90s, early on in the game. They kind of missed what we're talking about. It was just, for them, it was a different ball game. They hadn't seen what we had seen, and they hadn't experienced what we had experienced. Even I have a lot of, this is funny, I have a lot of friends from the 90s, I was going to say, but I have a lot of LGBTQ friends from the 90s, and their whole experience, it was quite different from what was going on for all of us in that time. You brought up a good point, Ryan, the community trying to come together with the fundraisers, with the potlucks. It is interesting to me, Tom, that it took all of this time, right, for them to have a Hamptons Pride. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so it's not the first gay organization on the East End, right?
I know.
It's the first one devoted to Pride, right? And yeah, it was just as surprising to me. In one of the essays that you talked about, I couldn't believe that the website hamptonspride.com and .org was available. I was like, that's not possible. Somebody's got to have that, but it's like $15, and I signed it up. Back in the 70s and 80s, when you're talking about, there was an organization pretty well known called the East End Gay Organization.
Yes.
And that was more of an advocacy organization, and legal rights, at a time when people were fighting, for that, just for visibility, and then the specter of AIDS hit, and that organization started to dissolve in the 2000s. And then there was a vacuum, and it kind of coincided with the raising of the swamp. The swamp, the last bar standing, the last gay club standing out in Wainscott. And then it was a bit of a vacuum for a while. So, and that's when
right. But you started, and I want you to talk about this. You say that East Hampton's Pride started with a bench.
With a bench, yes. Okay, so the swamp kind of ended in 2001 was really its last year. And then for a while it became what was known as the Star Room, and almost overnight it turned from a gay club to a A-list straight club.
Right.
And I continued to work there just on Saturdays, and I was so tethered to that spot. I had worked at the swamp for so long. I just didn't want to leave it.
But what was that like for you I remember when I had never been to the Star Room, but that is a vastly different environment from the one you came up in. What was it like for you to be behind that bar and nobody familiar?
Right. I was, I think, one of probably the only gay person there out of 75 people, maybe employees sometimes, or maybe there was another, I don't know. But I was, I had always worked, the Swamp was a black box disco, and then a little courtyard, and across the way was the Annex restaurant.
Right.
Yeah, it was a complex, right? So I had almost always worked in this one bar in the disco club. And I was just so used to it. It was just all like in my DNA, second nature. And I just stayed on. I was fast. I was a good bartender, like I pulled money in. So they just kept me, I was much older than anyone else there.
Aging gracefully behind the bar. I love it.
Tom, did you have a specialty drink that people came to for you? I know with Fire Island, if you want a peanut butter, you go to this venue. If you want a cherry, you go to this venue. What would have been your signature pour?
That's so funny. One of the reasons why I think I lasted so long as a bartender, I was a writer, and it complemented. I would write for most of the week, and I would bartend for like 3 days, right? Like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I didn't drink that much.
Because you're a bartender, you really, come on,
Well, Wendy, yeah, but I can't tell you how many bartenders I worked with that drank a lot and didn't last very long. Wow. So it's not a good place to work for somebody who drinks a lot behind a bar. But I didn't drink a lot, and I hated tequila, right? But I just followed this one recipe that I was taught, at Pines, I believe, and I just followed it. And everyone came to me for my margaritas, which I had never tasted. I just didn't
you never even tasted.
I just followed the recipe, like shake it up. I did it well. I made it well. I followed this one recipe, and some people would just come to me for those margaritas.
Well, I'm sure Ryan wants to know what was in that margarita. I know. I do
know that the agave tequila is known as one of the healthier options when you're having spirits. So, for health reasons, they came to you for your wellness.
It was all about wellness.
Wellness beverage.
Right. Tom House, wellness coach.
Yes.
Organizer. And writer too.
Right. Yes. Wellness coach and writer. So at that time in your life, right, you were bartending basically at a straight bar.
In the 2000s now, yeah.
Right, serving up tequila to the straight girls. They probably were all in love with you. You're very cute now. I'm sure you're cute then.
Well, thank you for that. I felt absolutely invisible at the Star Room.
Visible.
I have 2 questions before we get to Star Room. If we could stay in the Swamp for a moment, and I'll ask them both because you can maybe formulate your answer for both. How were celebrities, or was there a celebrity policy for the Swamp? Because I know when I was there, after the fundraisers are over, even at the 2 o'clock hour, you would see them roll in, and there was a bit of a commotion and an energy change. Was there an official policy? And I guess you didn't sign a non-disclosure form back then, so I'm sure you can talk about it now that the venue is plowed and it's gone. And the second,
if I signed it,
I incorporate into this story is, we hear about the stories of the disco era of Studio 54, and there's pictures in this video. There's not pictures and video of the Swamp. What was the most over-the-top, vivid memory that you have pre-Star Room in the Swamp? And then the celebrity policy. Those are the 2-in-1 question. It's a sale. You get 2 questions for 1 answer.
In terms of that, I don't remember ever signing any form.
And you can talk about it. How were celebrities handled when they rolled up? I know Janice Dickinson would roll in and name a few others.
Yeah. So, when I started there, I was young and like a deer in the headlights. I was really naive.
No idea.
Yeah, I mean, I would hear about those celebrities that would come before I got there, and I think I was kind of like post-celebrity, at the Swamp. And then, when the Star Room started, it was another generation, and the celebrities that they would have there, and the musical celebrities, I didn't know who they were.
That is pretty much an answer. You don't talk about the celebrities in the Hamptons if you're in the Hamptons. So that's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
The top thing. I know Halloween was the biggest. Even if people didn't live in the Hamptons, they would travel there.
To go there.
What was one of the 2 of the big memories that you had from that venue that were really very vivid for you today, even?
In terms of Halloween?
No, just the vivid things that you saw. Because like I said earlier, we've all seen the big spoon from Studio 54. We know the stories of people waiting on.
Ryan, I lived that big spoon. I was written up in Earl Wilson's column. She dances alone. I was one of the original Studio 54 girls. And I can't believe Ryan brought up Janice Dickinson because, of course, I knew her from back in the day. Yeah, let's get to talking about celebs.
And also, what did you see at the Swamp?
What did you see? Yeah,
something big that was
Swamp
story, and you don't have to name drop.
Don't have to name
why
drop.
not? We love name dropping.
Oh, I mean, you know, I think that the part of the Swamp that you're thinking of like preceded me, you know.
I'm talking about the 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003 era.
Yeah,
I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you. Was it a drag bar?
No, it wasn't on Halloween. It was. I mean,
everyone was
thrown out for having intimate relations in the venue.
Could you be thrown out for that?
No, had anyone been thrown out for having? Was it that type of venue where people got tossed for stuff like that?
At the Swamp, I don't think so.
And there wasn't a back room then? There was no back room, right? I don't recall ever hearing that there was a back room.
Not in my era. No. I heard stories, you know, the Swamp started in the 70s, you know, I missed all of that and a lot of the, you know, and most of the 80s. So that sort of heyday, that wildness preceded me. But I heard about things in the back of the patio. You know, I think they used to show some movies and stuff.
There you go, Ryan.
You looted
patio.
Thank you, Tom House. I won't tell you what I saw, but you know.
And you know, it was predominantly men hanging out, so the women's room was often not used, but it was used for other things. You know.
Well, that was before everybody started using, you know, bathrooms are gender neutral now, and a lot of the clubs, certainly a club in the city like Splash. Being a woman, I would go there and none of the doors locked. That made me completely crazy. I would always find one guy to stand in front of the door and guard it for me. They were all such gentlemen at Splash, so they would do that, no problem. But yeah, everything, as you know, everyone was using all the bathrooms, and things totally changed. So at what point did you say, I'm moving on, because you're a teacher now?
Yes.
And yeah. So when did all that start to happen? When did you leave what you loved doing?
So I always say that the Swamp left me. You know, I was going to stay there for as long as I, you know, had that. I was so tethered to that spot, you know, which is why, you know, I feel like, you know, like there's a soul connection between me and that ground, right? Which is now a park. So, but, you know, I feel like it left me. I even hung on, you know, when it became the Star Room, and I had very little connection. I was only working on Saturday nights, but, you know, it was very successful for a while. And I was still a writer, struggling writer then. And that was good. That was a good thing to do when you're a writer, you know, to bring in some cash. So that was 2007 was when that kind of folded. And at that time, I was like, well, I got to have a plan B now, you know, or a second act. And so I just, you know, it was always, you know, because I was a writer, always thought that, well, I could be an English teacher, right? So I just went to Stony Brook. I got a second master's from there in a master's in teaching English. So I had, right out of college, I had gotten one in creative writing, both at Stony Brook. So I just got certified, and then I applied, and I got lucky enough that they needed someone at Bridgehampton. I got hired right away.
Wow. So easy. So, I mean, you brought up something here that I've talked with a lot of actors about. You would have been what, in your early to mid 30s when you used Plan B?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's usually.
I was touching middle age.
Well, that is not middle age, Tom. My God, I could write a book about middle age. But it does seem that Plan B kicks in for many people in their early 30s. You know, what you thought you were going to do or whatever, you don't do exactly what you thought you were going to do, but you're still in the same path, right? Creative writing, English, become a teacher because you can still write. You're just not bartending.
Right. Yeah, but what a change in lifestyles.
Yes.
You go from like falling asleep at 5, 6 o'clock to getting up at 5, 6 o'clock.
Right.
It was, it was pretty hard to get used to. I'm still really not used to it, even after all this time. Mornings are really hard.
Still, even now. Ryan, did you have a plan B?
I'm in plan B right now. I'm in healthcare.
Yes.
I'm in healthcare.
Ryan's plan B.
Healthcare came to me, though. I had some experience with healthcare at the pandemic time, and a recruiter reached out to me and said, Ryan, you know how to do this. We need you. And I just heeded the call. So I've been in healthcare now for moving into my third year now.
Wow.
Third year in healthcare.
So you are living your plan B. And yeah, I never had a plan B. I started modeling and acting. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, everything stopped for me. And I started doing podcasting, and everything that I'm doing now is all online, which I don't know, Tom, it's kind of like you, I was very much stuck. I love my old lifestyle. I mean, at 27 years old, I was at Studio 54. I loved being there. And in many ways, my daughter always kids me. She always says I'm stuck in my late 20s. And I'm many decades past that, but I guess I really still am. I hosted club nights, and I still love that lifestyle. It's in us, right? Yes, Ryan.
You're not messy like a 20-year-old in a club venue. I was just recently at Tim Moth's birthday party at the Q when he was up on the stage dancing in a beautiful little dress, looking very attractive, but you were not messy. And I think that's the difference between a 20-year-old and you referring to yourself as stuck as a 20-year-old. You're very reserved even when you're partying, and you're very approachable and very fun when you're partying without being messy.
Oh, I love that, Ryan. Flattery will get you everywhere.
And if I had liked the song, I would have jumped there with you. It was a throwback night, and it was a lot of songs I'd already danced to 10, 15, 20 times. But yeah, I will join you on that stage, Wendy, and dance.
Yes, please. I just did an 80s night at Industry Bar, and it was just, I got to tell both of you, it was so much fun. Dancing to those songs again, performing to that song, "Oh Mickey." You all remember that?
With Jet Ryan is Mickey Mouse. I mean,
right, with my
reveal.
It was Mickey Mouse, and my other friend Evan and I were the Pom Pom Girls. You know what? Listen, it's great to go back to what was your best memories and your best life. But every single person that's on this stream right now, we've all had to move forward because we didn't have a choice. Which brings me to the fact that where the swamp was standing is now a park.
Yes.
How is that for you?
Okay, so I feel like we're really lucky that it became a park. It could have been anything. It could have been a car wash. It could have been a business, and then
a condo,
and then the memory would have been completely erased, right? But the fact that it's a park and that ground where the swamp stood, and it was there for a generation, like just shy of 25 years, right?
Right.
So many people, back in those days, and I experienced this part too, but the gay bars were homes for many people. They were one of the very few safe havens, So, that is still sacred ground, and it's grass right now, right? So it presents this opportunity that we could put something there that will unite the, gay and lesbians of yore with the LGBTQ plus of today and the future. Our vision is that some sort of outdoor social area, of course, this is a town park, right? And it's in the Hamptons. So, it has to please a lot of different audiences, but the town of East Hampton has been so welcoming, really, for the idea that the corporation that I just got started, that Hamptons Pride that we're raising money to eventually build something there, right on the footprint of the last gay bar standing, right? To connect that past, to not lose that history there. right? And all along Wainscott there.
And then people will always know what came before. Now, the bench, will there be like a plaque too?
So that was the thing. I would be driving home from school and I'd pass like the lot that used to be the swamp for 25 years, right? And 20 summers I worked there. and it was like, oh, something's got to go there to mark the swamp, and I would pass by. And then I read an article in the Star saying that the Wainscott Citizens Advisory Committee, that's the park is in Wainscott. They had said that they would dedicate one of the benches that was proposed for the design there to the LGBTQ community. And my heart just dropped. I was like, okay, so a bench, that's, they don't quite understand just how many thousands of lives were tethered to that spot. Right. And, maybe there's got to be something more. So I wrote an essay called What Kind of Bench, right? I 3 weeks, heart and soul, all day long, writing this, back to, when I used to be writing full time, put everything I had into it, and it reached all the right people. And we have sort of, a lot of people that are really behind this, that there is eventually going to be something. I mean, it has to meld with the rest of the park, and it has to be something that the neighbors in Wainscott are going to want to live next to,
right?
And because it's a town park, it has to ultimately be approved by the town, right? So, but they're saving the spot for us, and that's our founding goals that we're raising money to build an outdoor social area dedicated to LGBTQ plus East Enders and their allies, right? And the poetry of it is that this new generation will be hanging out right on the same spot that people did back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s.
Right. Which, and I'm thinking back in that time, things weren't even like called LGBTQ plus.
No.
But every time you said it, I'm going back to the words gay, lesbian, and straight. Those were the buzzwords that were around then.
Those are the historically accurate words, right? I mean, I can remember when the word lesbian is like, well, do we really need a word for women? Can't we just say gay women? And it's like, well, we do need another word, because gays really just means men, right? Yeah. And so I can remember when even the L was, like under question, but now, I mean, I love the LGBTQ plus,
Right, you do, and then there's some other letters they've added on. It becomes too much for me, that, and I spend a lot of time making sure my pronouns are correct.
Yes.
In the community, because the one, of course, I have the most problems with is they, because it's still, oh my God, you would have a problem with that, Tom. You're an English teacher.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm an English teacher.
How do you deal with they?
I love the neutral singular pronoun they. I love it.
Right. You too.
And
like
students use it. Students embrace it. They is, they self.
Right. They right.
Yeah, I'm not one of those English teachers that's like, you can't say that. I was like, I love it. I just think it's the English language never had a third person neutral pronoun. So it's something that we lacked. So, and people would say they anyway when they only meant one person. So just embrace that change, and just.
I grew up in a borough. I always said use. If you
the Bronx.
I back me up on that. You're up in the Bronx, right? Don't they still say use?
And moms with an S. I asked one of my friends about that. I said, does your mom have a girlfriend? He goes, no, everyone on the floor was responsible for raising the children.
Yes.
If my mom had to work, then I had to answer to Lucy. So I always use moms. It's not incorrect pronunciation.
Right.
I was so happy. Hi, Stephen. Thank you for that one.
There's no gender in use. That's great.
Tom, you mentioned your essay. I believe that's available at hamptonspride.org if someone would like to read it in full. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a link on there. Yeah, that's the essay that started Hamptons Pride.
hamptonspride.org to read the essay that Tom House just mentioned. And also about the space. One thing I want to mention about that location now being a park is energy cannot be erased. We may forget a few things, someone will write something down, but energy is never going to be erased. And we talked about the trauma that was happening in Long Island in the 80s. When people gathered at that point, they weren't afraid to see each other, like, oh, no, you're going to get me sick. There was a sense of relief that happened in that environment. So that energy is still there. So I think that's going to be an alluring thing for people to want to visit, even though the structures are torn down. And you can see also those photos of some of the structures on hamptonspride.org. There's some pictures in the articles. For those of you who never attended, you won't find photos and videos. It's a hush hush place, but there's a few things on the site.
But it looked like this, everybody.
That was the annex. That was restaurant part.
I just got my 5-minute warning. So this is my question.
Sure.
We're talking about the Hamptons. They've got a million guidelines, protocols, rules, and regulations. What kind of pushback have you been getting?
In terms of the corporation or the...
Yeah, the corporation and the talk of a social structure. And I mean, the locals.
Yes. I mean, so far, it's the idea is embraced. We're just developing. We had our launch party in September. We raised some money. We're probably going to need a lot more, to actually build something. But right now we're just in the stage where we have a design committee, and we're trying to go over, the request for qualifications, right, and then put that out there. But we are going to need to work, of course, as a town park. We have to work with the town, but I think it's possible. I really do think it's possible now that we can find something that will please. That will have a broad appeal. Nothing's universally pleasing, right? But something that will have a broad appeal. So far, it's been very cooperative and very open.
Very good.
But then of course it will come down to the details, right? So we're not at that stage yet. What I've heard is that it needs to be something that fits in with the rest of the park, which isn't very big. It's just over an acre.
Yeah, that's
and natural materials. It needs to be sort of green in its way. It needs to be sort of self-sustaining, and a little bit low key. I mean, it's got to be. It can't be something that really strikes out, stands out in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Right. But it's sort of.
I'm seeing a beautiful gazebo. A beautiful gazebo.
Possibly, yeah.
What about the sign that Tom House has? Will that make an appearance in the park, or will you show up on specific days? Did you steal that? Did you put it in your bag when you left one day? You have the swamp sign.
I didn't quite steal it.
He borrowed it.
I bartended in front of it the whole time that I worked there, when it was the swamp. And I had gone through 3 sets of owners, and that sign was still there. And I was like, I don't know where the sign originally came from, but I think it belongs to me more than it belongs to anyone else.
Where is it now?
I was always the last one to close. So I think one day I just left with the sign. Where is it now?
You got it.
You mean that sign?
There it is. Tom, you're in a very interesting place right now. You're starting the first ever Hamptons Pride event parade.
Yes.
And gathering, and DJ Karen Ward. There are places that don't have pride. What would you tell people who are in a city or a town or a village that doesn't have a pride? You haven't launched yours yet. You're in those early stages. It's coming on June 4th. What would you tell people who don't have a pride in their neighborhood? What did you learn so far? And should they do it? Back off. It's crazy. Where are you at now? Tell this to the answer to the people who don't have a pride, who might be thinking about starting one.
Yes. Well, people have said that I'm crazy, to have taken this on. But I do want to give a plug to the mayor of East Hampton Village, Jerry Lawson. This was his, we just got our 501c3 designation in October, and we thought, well, maybe we'll have a pride parade at some point. Right. But then it was through a friend, the mayor said, this is something lacking. We need to have a pride parade here. So we took it on very short notice. I would say to those people, make sure you start really early with your planning.
Yes.
Like January, the latest.
The latest. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan. We're out of time. My God, the clock went so fast today. Best of luck to you, Tom.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And whoever is listening, if you can get out to the Hamptons, go to their Pride Parade.
June 4th.
June 4th. Be there or be square. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.